Hello and welcome to the lab portion of this week. Today we are going to be reviewing the youth baseball lineup lab it's supposed to randomly assign positions to 12 baseball players, and this is in conjunction with Exam 4. So working on this should give you a pretty clean foundation for how to take on Exam 4. So I'll go ahead and I'll read this. So randomly assign the 12 baseball positions listed below to the 12 baseball players. The baseball players' names are given as Jackson, Ben, Harper, Mason, Sean, Robert, Hayden, James, Ken, Tammy, Sue, and Josh. And the baseball positions are outlined here as P for pitcher, C for catcher, 1B for first base, 2B for second base, 3B for third base, SS for shortstop, LF for left field, LCF for left center field, RCF for right center field, RF right field, and then 2 out positions as 2 players can be out during an inning. So this is the kind of sample input and sample output kind of mixed into one. So the user is prompted to enter each player's name, where each number is given as 1 through 12, depending on which player is being addressed. And then the output is the names under the names column and the position they are randomly assigned in the position column. There's also some pseudocode here at the bottom that says kind of how to handle this. And it says, while there are players who need to be assigned positions, we're going to get that player's name, generate some random number, and indicate that the position is now taken and assign it to that player. Then we display the name and the position header and display the player names and their positions. So that's how this project is going to be approached. I'll go ahead and I'll walk you through the solution. The solution file is also contained underneath in the module. So I'm going to start by creating a new file, and we will call this course.cpp, and I'm going to create it here. And I mentioned in the last video that I did update something on Visual Studio Code, and I'm getting this, but I'm pretty sure that's temporary. I won't get that forever. So let's start by including some of the libraries we're going to use. And as typical, we're going to use IOStream for input and output. We're going to, I don't know why I wrote including. We're going to include the string library, and we are going to include CS-232. And this is so that we could use srand. It gives us access to the rand function and srand function, which we use to randomly generate numbers. And we will also want to use ctime. And to use time, so to use this is going to return the number of seconds that have elapsed since January 1st, 1970. It allows us to seed the random number generator using the current time so that when we generate the random number, it's not always the same set of random numbers. It's different every time. It just kind of helps us get closer to true random. And then we want to say using namespace std, so we don't have to std : everything. And we're going to, okay, so we need to create a variable that holds the maximum number of players. And we need to do this because we're going to be using a few different arrays, a few different string arrays to keep track of the players and the positions that we've granted them. And so since we're using arrays, we need to designate the max size of each array. And it's going to be 12. There's 12 players. So I need to create a const int, and then we'll call this max num of players, and we'll set it equal to 12. And again, it's just good practice to create a separate variable or a separate constant that does something like this. So if we need to like say, hey, this baseball team is more than 12 players, we can just change it here instead of having to manually edit every instance of where we put 12 directly as the size of each array. Okay, and apologies again for the, yeah, I drink water when I record these. My mouth gets kind of dry when I'm talking a lot. So now we're going to make our more boilerplate stuff. So int main, return 0. Okay, so we have our main function. And we want to create a variable that's going to store the player names that the user inputs. So let's start with that. It's going to be of type string. So we name string and we're going to call it player names. And it's going to have the constant max num of players. Okay. We also need another array that's going to correspond to the position that each player is assigned. So we're going to say string player position, and we're going to call this max num of players size. That's how big it is. That looks good so far. And then we need a string array that's going to store the positions, so the possible positions that could be assigned to each player. And I'll go ahead and I'll manually write this. And when you make exam 4, you could probably use this as well. So it'll be contained in the source code below, so you don't have to do what I'm doing here, where I'm having to type out each possible position. Okay, I think there's first base, second base, third base. And this part's kind of slow. If you want to skip, if you're not following along and you want to skip, it's probably fine. Shortstop, left field, left center field, RCF, right center field. And then you know what? I'm going to hit enter. This is kind of going on a little funky. And we'll say RF, out, out. So this is the list of all possible positions. Notice that out is included twice because two players will need to be out for the inning. And this is also going to mirror what you need to do for exam 4. So yeah, and I'm going to save. I'm saving right now. Don't forget to save on your own end. We also need an array that keeps track of whether or not people have been assigned or players have been assigned. So I'm going to give this of type bool is assigned. I'm going to give that to, so far when we first start the program, everybody's going to be not assigned to something. So I'll just copy this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I'll go through it and I'll count these out very likely. I will do this. I will save, and then I will pause to count them. Okay, and I counted everything, and I put everything kind of in the same, on the screen so everybody can see it and just follow along more easily. Okay, so again, this array keeps track of which positions have already been taken. So if is assigned index 3 is true, it means that the 4th position was already taken. So we're going to be, because every array that we are defining has 12 things in it, we're able to kind of use them in parallel with each other and access the various indices to correspond directly to the same indice for a different array. Okay, and we can now get started on the rest. So one of the biggest parts of this program is generating random numbers, and there is a review video for this as well. If you want to take a look at that first, or it's fine if you want to reference this for the review, but we are going to create an integer rand num, set it equal to 0, and this is where we're going to store the random number that we get. So we're going to randomize the number, and this is going to correspond to a position that we can possibly get. So we're going to create a lower bound, which is 0, the lowest number it can be. And we're going to have an upper bound for this number, and this is going to be whatever the maximum number of players is, -1. So the upper bound is 11 in this case. Arrays always start at 0 in C++. Or arrays just start at, I don't know, maybe you could probably change it, but in C++, arrays start at 0. And we want to seed a random number generator. We're going to say srand time 0. So this is a command we use to seed the random number generator. This line initializes our random number generator with the current time, and it makes sure that we get different results each time we run the program. Getting closer and closer to true random is what we're trying to do. So let's save. Okay, so now we're going to loop over each player. So we're going to say for I equals 0, I less than the max number of players, I plus plus, and curly brace, just your basic run-of-the-mill for loop. Okay, so now that now that we're set up to loop over each player, we want to get the player name. So we will say cout, what is player, some space here, and then we want to access the number that we're on. And we're going to do this by saying I plus 1, because we don't want to say player 0. That's usually not how we speak in natural language. So we would say player 1 if we meant to refer to the first player. So we do I plus 1. And then we put a little apostrophe S to show possessive of that person, and then first name. Okay, and from this, we want the user to input player name I. So whatever index we're on, access that index in the array and store the name. Access the index in player names and then store that name there. Okay, so that's good for now. At this point, we're going to generate a random number. Okay, and we're going to say int. It's going to be an integer because it needs to refer to a possible position that a player can play. So it needs to be an integer. Range size equals upper bound minus lower bound plus 1. Okay, so we're giving the size of the range that we're going to use with our random number generator. So we're going to say random equals, and then we call the rand function. We mod it by the range size, and then we add lower bound. And we do know that lower bound is 0, but we want the program to be robust. So for example, this is a way to generate a random number, but also let's say, you wanted to do this, but the numbers that you're thinking of don't start at 0. Maybe they start at some other lower bound. This is a more general way to do that. And this code is more modular because we've allowed this to be able to happen, lower bound to be able to be changed, instead of just inputting a 0 or not inputting it at all. So here, this line, we're trying to generate an integer between 0 and 11 inclusive. The rand function generates a huge random integer that's usually between 0 and whatever the maximum is, which is like a large constant, depending on your system. And then using the modulus operator, modding by the range size, helps us to shrink that big number into a smaller number that's within the range that we're going for. And in this case, we want the range to be we want the range to be befitting of values that are corresponding with our positions array. Okay, so now what we want to do next is we want to generate, we want to say while is assigned random is true. We want to check if the randomly chosen position is already taken. So if it is, we want to keep generating a new number until we find one that's available. So to do that, we just say random. It's kind of just what we wrote before, writing in here for posterity plus lower bound. Okay. And you'll notice that our while loop is within this for loop. So we are doing this for each, we're going through this process for each player. Okay. And then once we find an available spot, then we mark it as assigned and store the position next to the player's name. So we'll say, so this is what happens after that. We say is assigned random equals true. So now the position in the corresponding is assigned array is true. And again, I mentioned earlier that because each of these arrays are the same size, we did that on purpose, we wanted them to correspond to the index of that player. So that's why we're doing it this way. And now, so we need to now assign the position to the player. So we already said, okay, the position's taken, and then here's the step where we assign that position to the player. So we say positions array random. So now that position is assigned to that player, and it's also marked as having been taken. And so this is going to be done. This process is going to happen for every player. Okay, so we're in the home stretch. I don't know if baseball uses home stretch as a thing, but we're close to finishing this program, is what I want to say. So I'm going to step outside of this for loop. And I did mention earlier in the previous video that sometimes when we have like a larger program, we'll mark that it's the end of that particular for loop. You could do that here. You don't have to do that here. The program's actually rather small. But in your exam code, it might get a little big, so you might need to do something like that. So let's write the code to display our result. So the first thing that we need to do, so let's refer back to our lab PDF. So the first thing we need to do is display a header. This is the header we're talking about. Name, position, tabbed pretty far away, and then some dotted lines to separate and create a visual distinction between the header and the players and their positions. So to do that, we are going to cout a blank line, create a blank line. And then we're going to output the name, the title name, and then tab a couple times, position, end line there, because we want to go to the next line. And on the next line, you're going to notice there is some dashed lines. So we'll say cout, and this is going to go pretty far. I think that should be sufficient. And line there, because now we want to go to the next line. And underneath that, we have the players' names and their corresponding position tabbed further away. So there's some space here. These are not just spaces, they're tabulations. So that's where this /t comes in. So we're almost done with our output. We're going to say cout. Let's put a note here instead. Display the players' names and their positions. Okay, and this part will use a for loop. We're going to say for int I equals 0, so for the very first person, while it's less than the maximum number of people we have playing, I++. Oh, capital I. Okay. And then we're going to say cout the player name at that position. And there's a couple tabs there. So these are strings, so they go like this. And then we say player, whatever the position, the corresponding position in that array is, and then endl. And then that should do it. If I get rid of these lines here, I'm going to save, make sure that you're saving too. Okay, and at this stage, we can run the program. So I'm going to open up a terminal here, new terminal. And this might be a little small for you, but I'm going to say g++ source.cpp. Give me the option to debug, which is -g. Give me the option compile the program -o, and then the name of the executable, which is it's usually aout. People normally do this. If you want to name your executable something else, you can. I'm going to hit enter, and that compiles the program. And then to run it, I press /aout. And then it says, what is the player's first name? So I want to get this right. So just give me a moment while I adjust the screen. And I hope you guys can see this. It's probably quite small now. But we want the output to look similar. So we'll say the first player's name is Robert. You could skip this part if you're not doing this part, or if you trust that it's going to come out right. Jackson, Kristen, Stacy, Luke, Mia, Finn, Jenny, AJ, Kenzie, Wesley. Okay, and then I have my positions. So this output looks very similar to the one that you guys see in the PDF. So it looks very similar to this. So this is sufficient. And the two tabs are sufficient room to display this appropriately. And that's it. So I hope that this code helps you with generating random numbers, and maybe something to look back to if you ever need to generate random numbers somewhere. And thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful day.